The Crystal Keepers, Chapter 11, Awakening. Sean awoke with a skull-splitting headache. He could hear his alarm clock beeping nearby. He cracked open an eye and scanned his room until he found the green numbers. They read 12:42 p.m. Sean ripped off his covers and jumped out of bed. He pounded the snooze button, noticing the sun outside casting bright yellow rays onto the floor of his bedroom. The storm from last night seemed to have passed, and now Sean was relentlessly imagining Spencer's picture printed on the side of a milk carton. He put on his shoes and tied them, then grabbed his black cap with the red stitching and slipped it over his short brown hair. After that, Sean went to his phone sitting on the computer table and dialed Spencer's number. Maybe it would work now that the storm had ended. This time it actually rang, and after 3 repeated chimes, Spencer answered. Hello? Sean was overwhelmed with relief to hear his voice. Spencer, you're not dead. What happened last night, man? That was crazy. Sean could hear Spencer crackling a plastic bag. Next, he heard potato chips crunching. Why are you using your house phone? Spencer asked. Mine got killed by the rain, so I had to use this one, but seriously, what happened last night? The phone was silent for a long time before Spencer replied. Last night, why do you keep saying that? Nothing happened last night, other than that huge storm. Sean could hardly breathe. Did he really not remember? What do you mean? Last night at the mine shaft. There's gold in them there hills. Ring any bells? Spencer ate another handful of potato chips before replying to Sean's question, crunching noisily the entire time. How did you know I was at the old mine shaft yesterday? We went there together. Don't you remember when we found the locked safe and pulled it out of the ground? Sean heard Spencer clear his throat as he sat up from his squeaky recliner. Yeah, I do remember that, but you definitely weren't there. Sam and Nick came over and helped me pull that thing out of the ground. Then we put it on a wagon and brought it to my house. I found a bunch of old maps inside. I'm trying to strong-arm the county into 10 grand. Sean was startled, confused, then annoyed. They'll never give you that much for some old maps, but anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. Do you remember the crystal at least? The one we found in the hole? Man, when I grabbed that thing, it was like time froze, or I was going faster, or something. All these shadow people started coming towards me, accusing me of stealing it. There was even this, black hole thing inside, I swear, man. For a long time, Spencer said nothing, which was incredibly annoying for Sean. Hello? Look, you need to get some sleep. Porshuzzi's got us running mind labs with his astronomy stuff. I feel the same way sometimes. Anyways, I'm waiting on a call from the mayor's office, so I'll talk to you later, man. Text me when you get a new phone. No, Spencer, I'm not sleep deprived. I just... Dial tone interrupted him. Sean released a breath and set the phone back on its hook, rubbing his temples in frustration. Some friend you are, he grumbled, thinking of all the times he had endured Spencer's conspiracy theories and pointless schemes. Sean sat on his bed and looked around. He set his eyes upon the crystal for the first time all morning. He noticed something glinting from inside, though he thought it was probably just the sun. But just to be sure, Sean walked to his table and stared at the crystal to investigate. As his eyes adjusted to the dim inner chamber, Sean could see the dancing armada of sparks once more, just like the night before, churning in a wide oblong circle that immediately brought back the terror of the fact it was real. No. Sean covered his mouth to keep quiet. Why is this happening? He whispered in frustration. Sean went to his window and closed the drapes, causing his room to go dark. He then went back to his table and looked at the crystal with refreshed eyes. Inside its center was an array of white-hot sparks, jumping around the edges, refusing to be consumed by the darkness. The sparks grew in number until the crystal resembled a snow globe of shooting neon particles. Sean reached down and took the crystal into his fingers. The sparks reacted, dancing and jumping more furiously, speeding out of the darkness and leaving long trails of light. He felt feverish as he watched, like his head was spinning, and the crystal was becoming hot against his skin. Sean dropped to his knees, trying desperately to remain conscious. He breathed mechanically to ensure he wouldn't forget. Focusing desperately on the light show within, Sean watched as the swirling black abyss grinded to a sudden and unending halt. It stopped the churning motion, and the darkness became still. Then, with no warning at all, the black hole exploded, flooding the inside of the crystal with thousands of particles of bright blue light. The embers swirled into a long oval inside the crystal, from tip to tip of the stone, stretching out the entire distance of the rock. The sparks flew so fast it looked as if a rod of blue energy was contained within. Then, with a fiery flash of blue, the light exploded through Sean's fingers and knocked him to the floor. Sean dropped the crystal as he hit the carpet. He felt icy sweat cling to his body as he shivered. Sean rolled to his side, desperately trying to overcome the fatigue he now felt. It was like someone had kicked him in the lungs. He set his eyes upon the crystal to see that the light show was no longer there. The sparks had disappeared, but there was a faint blue glow flickering in the darkness of its small blue chamber. Sean tried with all his strength to crawl towards it. He clawed to the crystal's side and closed the rock within his fist. He hid the light from view. He almost didn't want to see it. What else was about to change? What act of cruelty did the stone have in store now? Sean slowly opened his fingers until he'd revealed a dancing blue light emanating from just inside the rock. Directly in the center of the stone was a dancing blue flame, wavering lightly to the breeze of unseen winds. It was a slap across Sean's face, a reminder that last night really did happen. Sean fell against his carpet. He tried not to think about what he'd just seen, but that was impossible now. "Why did I grab this stupid rock?" he whined, his voice muffled by the carpet. He lay there for a second, sniffing dust from between the fibers in absolute peace. A creaking floorboard from nearby grabbed Sean's attention. He looked and saw his grandfather in his wheelchair at the edge of the doorway. The old man was frozen, staring at Sean with steely eyes. "Where did you find that rock?" his grandfather demanded, in an angry tone of resentment and disgust that both surprised and horrified Sean. At the old gold mine," Sean answered, his voice trembling. He lay there on his stomach, still clutching the blue crystal. His grandpa turned back to the other room and began wheeling towards the door. "Come with me," the old man ordered. Sean didn't move for a long time, shocked by his grandfather's appearance. The old man hardly ever spoke, and he never invited anyone into his room. But now he had questions and wanted to talk. About the crystal? Sean was almost unable to react. What did you want, Grandpa?" Sean got to his feet and watched as his grandfather opened the door to his bedroom and wheeled inside. Sean followed, noticing the war medals hanging on every wall in sight. He saw his grandfather's old helicopter pilot uniform, stained with something Sean had always hoped was motor oil. His grandfather went towards a large wicker chest and opened it. The old man reached inside and pulled out a bearskin with brown fur. He turned and flopped the pelt onto a nearby table. Sean noticed a massive dark hole just beneath the bear's neck that was as large around as his grandfather's chest. The skin along the edge was melted, and not a single blade of fur had survived uncharred. "What is this?" Sean asked in mortified confusion. His grandfather drew a deep breath, then frowned and glared. "You see that hole, son?" he asked, pointing. Sean nodded. "That's what's going to happen to you if you keep messing around with that rock. I was there the day this bear was killed. I was there 70 years ago." Sean looked into the empty eyes that occupied the bear's face. "What did this?" he asked, trying to imagine what could have caused something so gruesome to happen to a creature so large. Sean's grandfather took a heavy breath. A girl. And not just any girl. This girl had incredible power. Power no man should possess. Something I'd never seen before. Some type of electricity concentrating weapon, a sort of coil maybe, buried beneath her skin. Damn it, I don't know what to call what she did. She shot lightning from her hands like she was some sort of she-Zeus, boy. That's what I saw that night. And this here was the result. His grandfather slammed a fist against the bearskin. Sean could hardly believe what he'd just heard. It was all too familiar, and surreal, like what had happened the night before. He practically tiptoed over his next words. Grandpa, are you really sure that's what you saw? She shot lightning from her hands? His grandpa let out a short, irritated grunt. Look here. That rock that you hold in your hand like it's some kind of damn museum piece, that was the source of her power. I know it was. And I know that if you keep messing with that thing, you're gonna end up just like your dad did. Just like I almost did. My dad? Sean thought about the day his father died, when the car he was driving was blown off a bridge by an intense storm. It happened when Sean was only 6 years old. But he died in a... His grandpa roared. I know how he died, boy. Now look at me. I'm not crazy. I've seen it happen with my own 2 eyes. Wind that appears out of nowhere, whistling and screaming like the very hounds of Satan were chasing after him. They blew my chopper right out of the sky in Vietnam. I was lucky to get away with my life. Sean was beginning to feel afraid. He'd never heard his grandfather speak like this before. It gets really stormy in places like Vietnam. The old man's face twisted with rage. He thrust out at Sean, grabbing him by the collar of his shirt in a death grip. Listen here. I flew up the rivers of Saigon and down the Phu Bai Valley. I've pulled soldiers off of battlefields who were more mincemeat than man. I've come face to face with death many times, but nothing ever scared me so much as the look that girl had in her eyes on that night in that forest. She meant to kill me, and she told me that she would, all because of that rock. Sean looked down at the crystal, contemplating what his grandfather said. The blue fire was still dancing inside. He gazed up, still hanging by the old man's grip. The day after she killed that bear, I went back to the ridge where I found her for the first time. She was lying dead at the bottom of that cliff, crumpled in a lifeless heap. But she didn't fall. No, this girl couldn't be killed by any force that me or you would recognize. Whoever controls those winds must have pushed her. I heard the screaming and whistling the night she died, just like the night your father died, the night I almost died. Just the same as last night. Sean felt his jaw hanging open. His mind could hardly process all he was being told. Could the winds really be so threatening? Sean wasn't sure what to think. What if I can't stop it? What if it's too late? It's not too late. Now listen to me, boy. You take that rock back to the ridge and drop it down that old abandoned mine shaft. It's flooded, so there's no risk of anyone finding it down there. And after you do that, you come back here straight away, and then we never speak of this again. Do you understand me? Yes, sir, Sean stammered as a forced reaction. Sean's grandpa released his grip on Sean's shirt and let him fall to the floor in a loose pile. He stared up at his grandfather, wondering what other secrets he was hiding. Now go, the old man said. I've got thinking to do. Sean's grandpa turned his wheelchair back towards the window and whipped open the curtains. Scene change. Sean jogged down the road towards the mine shaft. The storm had returned, but was much more intense. The trees surrounding the road were rocking as if a tornado was about to touch down. He put his eyes on the clouds and wondered when the sprinkling rain would transform into a full deluge of heavy drops. His grandfather's warning about the wind was hardly comforting now. Sean kept looking over his shoulder for unknown intruders, but never saw anything. The veil of mist that hung over made it difficult to see far. Sean had never felt so scared in his life. Could some sort of screaming, whistling wind truly have had something to do with his father's death? Had it really tried to kill his grandfather? He didn't know the answer and feared he never would. All he knew now was that he had to get rid of the crystal before something bad happened again. Sean scanned the road and finally noticed the trail that led to the old gold mine. As he approached, the wind seemed to intensify. Sean watched as squirrels and chipmunks, as well as birds of all kinds, retreated from the area where he was walking. It was like even the animals could sense some unknown evil following him along. Sean stepped off the road and onto the dirt trail, proceeding quickly over the first chain. Dead leaves and sticks crunched and crackled underfoot as he descended. He noticed the same burning, rotting smell from yesterday again, clogging his nose with new fumes. Deeper and deeper he went, and with every step came an increase in the wind's intensity. The entire forest had become animated with movement around him. Sean saw clouds pouring overhead like waves washing across the sea. Then, with a swift blast, his favorite black hat with red stitching was ripped straight off his head and sent airborne. No! Sean made a vain couple of steps in pursuit, but with an outstretched arm, let it fly away to the unknown. First his phone, now his favorite hat. The winds became so violent Sean could hardly stay still. He was being blown mercilessly from side to side until at last he decided to drop to his knees and crawl. He came to the second chain at the closest part of the cliff and slunk underneath it. As he came to the other side, near the path's edge, a rapid gust poured over Sean's back and grabbed the red metal sign warning of the 40-foot drop-off, tearing it right out of its concrete foundation, pole and all. "What is going on?" Sean screamed. It was like someone knew what he was planning to do and didn't like it. He wished he was back at home, safe in his room, not out here in a forest thanks to some dead girl's blue rock. Sean crawled until he arrived at the edge of the cliff. Beneath him, at the bottom, was the same empty hole he and Spencer had pulled the safe from yesterday, and to his horror, hundreds of footprints surrounding it. That was the moment when the pure enormity of the situation became clear. The shadow people were real. Evidence of something his mind refused to believe staring him right in the face, as if the crystal's fire hadn't already been enough. Gusts of wind ripped through the area like an invisible freight train. Sean decided he wasn't going to risk climbing down from the rocks on a day like this. He pulled the crystal from his pocket and hung it over the edge, dangling the rock by its long silver chain. "Goodbye, Blue Rock. Thanks for all this great excitement." Sean stared at the crystal one last time before he let it go. The colors inside were so peaceful, so relaxing, so unique. And now he was just supposed to let it go, leave it behind, never speak of it again. Sean broke eye contact with the crystal, realizing those questions didn't matter now. It wasn't his crystal, and he surely didn't want to learn how to use it. He was just happy that he could still breathe and think and decide what to do with his life. And he did decide what to do. So Sean dropped the crystal and let it fly free from his fingers. As if a switch had been flipped, the entire storm came to a halt. The sprinkles of moisture no longer fell, and the gust of wind quit blowing. Sean stood and peered around the forest as trees recoiled violently in the aftermath of the storm. He looked down the wall of the cliff and his eyes caught the crystal just before it struck the ground. As quickly as they left, the winds returned, this time twice as strong. A gust collided with Sean's back and nearly pushed him over the edge. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end from the close call. He noticed that the wind sounded different this time. Sean could hear the screaming and whistling his grandfather had spoken of, the same noise he had heard last night, the same as when his father had died. The winds are real! Sean could hardly believe any of this was possible. It was like some insane nightmare had come to life. He stepped back from the cliff and swung his arms to regain balance. He was extremely vulnerable out here in the wild, especially by himself. He had done what his grandfather asked, and now the crystal was gone. It was time to leave this place, for good. Sean turned from the cliff and looked up the trail, and that was when his eyes met something he could barely understand. The forest in front of him was empty, except for a wide wave of dust that was pouring down the path at incredible speeds, roaring and screaming as it came closer. There was nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide. Sean watched as white streaks whipped through the air and caught hundreds of dead leaves, twigs, and grass, pushing it all into a horizontal cyclone that barreled directly towards where he was standing. The formation burst together and fell on him like a crashing wave exploding against the shore. The whirlwind tossed Sean back like a rag doll, throwing him off the top of the cliff. Sean's stomach tightened as the ground fell away. The world tumbled and flipped before his eyes. Sean could see rocks and trees and bushes blurring past his vision in a hazy smear. He reached out, hoping to get a hold of anything, but a bright flash of white blinded him, causing him to instinctively look away. As the wind roared past his ears, Sean could sense the ground coming up to meet him. He clutched his shoulders as tight as he could, trying not to imagine the pain he was about to feel. He tried to drift his thoughts back to home, but the fear stole anything pleasant. He imagined death, the end of everything, the conclusion to his part in the story of life, a finish to something that had just barely begun, and the only thing he could do now was wait for it to happen. Sean smashed back first into the rocks at the base of the cliff, then tumbled violently to the grass below. End of chapter.